the phrase that I wrote down is, this is the problem with any individual revenge. It's never enough. There's always more people to kill, and there's always too many consequences.
Hey everybody, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Erin.
Dr. Kristen.
Welcome back to our YouTube channel.
We've missed you.
We've been gone for almost 3 months, I calculated this morning. I was like, good night, nurse. That's a big break. But it was necessary. We're glad we did it. We've been very busy in the break from YouTube, so we have lots to catch you up on. But as the title says, we are here to discuss episode 1, Morning of The Handmaid's Tale season 5. Before I get into the nitty gritty of what we've been doing for 3 months and what we're doing now, you should know, if this is your first time joining us, hello. If you are expecting a blow by blow recap of this episode, go with God and go elsewhere. That's it's not really our jam. We are more of a thematic, conceptual, cinematographic, like plot line, character development, bigger kind of meatier issues than this happened, then this happened, then this happened. So we'll be diving into mostly what's going on with June. She takes up a lot of oxygen in this first episode, but we also get a glimpse of Nick, whom we belovingly call Eyebrows, and we get some Serena Joy as well. So it was a doozy to start us off. But before we get started, we wanted to remind everybody, if you're recently rejoining us on our tiny little corner of the internet, that we have started a Patreon in the month of September this year, 2022. And our first tier for the first portion of our Patreon is called being a Mayday member, because it is obviously tied to our coverage of The Handmaid's Tale. For $5 a month, what is it, $7 Canadian?
$7 Canadian, yes.
I don't have all the other translations for our international crew, but for $5 you can become a Mayday member and you'll get exclusive Handmaid's Tale content.
Yep.
So we're going to be introducing a couple of those ideas in our first few videos as we get rolling on this Patreon. But we also really want it to be a collaborative effort too. So if you want to join us, we want to hear from you about what kind of content that you want, how you want to engage with us. We want your help building this community because you guys have helped us build this YouTube community already. So this episode, towards the end, we'll be discussing and teasing what we're going to call Mayday moments, which will be extra bits of analysis that we will do on camera only for our Patreons. We're also going to introduce, probably in episode 2, leading into episode 3, the Mayday mailbag. We like an alliteration, in case you couldn't tell. Which will be your opportunity to watch the episode, post a comment or a question on the Patreon, and have us react to it for you exclusively. $5. So come, become a Mayday member, join us on this journey. We hope that you do. All right, all the bits and bobs out of the way. Let's talk about, crack those knuckles.
Let's get going.
Let's go.
Yeah. Can I just say my first note is previously on Handmaid's Tale, all of seasons 3 and 4. Like that was an incredibly helpful but very long previously on. I almost wanted them to start doing bullet point, like scrolling, like Star Wars style.
Yeah, just do this. Yeah, I know. I pressed play and I looked at my mom. I was like, I hope we get a previously on, and it was like previously on, and I was like, thank you so much. Yeah, and we pick up with this one right where we left off. which is with June, apparently back at her house in Toronto, in the Toronto suburbs, contemplating taking a shower and washing all of Fred Waterford's blood off her person. And very clearly flashing back to how she felt. So, right after that, we get the only scene with Nick. So I think let's talk about that first and get our thoughts and feelings about it, because he doesn't show up again the rest of the episode. So then we can go to what I am now going to call, like, the ping pong match of Serena and June. They're just like, Serena, June, Serena, June, Serena, June. Especially towards the end of episode 2. They are hitting us over the head with the fact that they are paralleling these two women's stories. But you know what? It worked. So, Nick is home. He drives up to his house, has his wedding ring on, and we meet his wife, Rose, who is clearly disabled.
Yes.
She's walking with a cane. They speak in all the Gilead speak, and then she asks him how it went, and if she got done what she needed to get done, and then she said, I hope June finds some peace.
And that is when I had to hit pause and lean back in my chair and say, why is a wife not saying off Fred? What does she know about June? Does she know about Nicole? Like, what? And then, like, the thing I wrote in my notes is, are these millennial commanders? Like, the super chill version, like, the next generation, where it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot about Gilead I love. There's a lot that I hate. And we're just going to be subversive in our own house. Like, the next generation of Commander Lawrences.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also had this fear that, like, there just wasn't, no one double-checked the continuity that she should have said off for it. Like, that I'm going to make this big deal out of it in my head, and it's in fact just an error.
Yeah, I mean, we've been burned too many times. We've got the scars to prove it from this show. But I think the fact that she said June, coupled with the fact that she clearly knows a lot of stuff, but, like, y'all, this just, like, a stream of questions. How did they meet? Did he know her from the before times? How come she used all the Gilead speak and then was comfortable calling her June? Like, who is this Rose person? We need to know what's happening. None of us know how long they've been married, when they got married. The first time we ever saw Nick's wedding ring was when he left June in that house on the border with the file about Hannah. So yeah, lots of questions. We don't get any answers about Rose in episode 2, but hopefully we will this season. Hopefully it's just not one of those things where they, like, tease us and then drop it. But speaking of things that they didn't drop, they have not dropped Serena Joy.
Oh boy, have they not. Yvonne Strahovski is eating every piece of scenery that she can get her hands on, and I doff my cap to her. Yeah. So we'll talk about Serena. How about, and then we'll talk about June. Okay. I think. Does that work for you? Yeah, for sure. Because we should separate them. Because if we do the ping pong they did, I will probably fall. Like, I will probably lose my mind.
It's too much. So let's just talk about all the things we want to say about Serena. Then we could talk about most of the things we want to say about June. Aside from our Mayday moment, but more on that in a mo. Haha. So Serena basically finds out in this episode that Fred has been murdered. She is in her super fancy prison doing prenatal yoga. I hope she doesn't do any twists. Not good for the baby. But she's living the life of a political refugee in a swanky Canadian prison. And then she's told that Fred is dead and that she is potentially at risk of harm and is moved to an even swankier prison, aka a house in the country. And Twello shows up, hot Canadian, who the Vulture recaps refer to as White Knight, which I love. Capital W, capital K.
That's good. He is certainly fulfilling that archetype these days. Yeah,
there's a white knight vibes.
Yeah,
strong White Knight vibes from Mark Twello. She says that she wants to see Fred's body. she is insistent upon it. Twello explains a bit about the fact that he was part of a prisoner exchange and then he kind of lost Fred in the woods, which she doesn't particularly care for. And then he fills her in on what was delivered to the ICC detention center, which was Fred's wedding ring and a severed finger. And that's when Serena looks at him and goes, "This wasn't Gilead." And he was like, "Well, how do you know that?" She goes, "Because it was June Osborne." Which, starts, I think, what will be the rest of the 2 seasons, this season and the next season, season 6, which will be the last ping pong match between Serena and June.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of dead bodies.
Yeah.
In between the two of them, and I don't know who's going to be standing at the end, but that was the moment where I think like it solidified this. Yeah. I don't know, the world war to end world wars between those two. So then she gets to see his body, and she flips out at Twello. Again, fantastic acting from Yvonne Strahovski, and it's like, hilariously, Twello just wants her to like go like, "Oh yeah, well, like you can go bury him, like we're gonna bury him, send it back to and then you can just live in Canada." She was like, "With June Osborne, who butchered my husband." And she screams at him, "Do you know what she is capable of?" And then like rips off the covering over Fred, and we get to see what she's capable of, and it was gross and I didn't care for it. But then I think one of the most fascinating scenes, and I'll be curious to see what you thought of it, happened right after that as she's leaving the ICC detention center, presumably. And there's a handful, several dozen people waiting outside with candles for Serena. And they form like along the path. And she gets to walk past them and they start mumbling like, "We're sorry for your loss, under his eye, may the Lord blah, blah, blah." And the physical transformation of Serena in that moment, where she goes from like scared and vulnerable and grieving to, "Oh, I realize the potential in this,"
to political real fast.
So fast. I thought it was really, really well executed, and props, snaps to Yvonne Strahovski for making that so clear what was happening. But I got like chills watching it because I was like, "Oh Lord, this is the Serena that like de facto started Gilead with her book tour." And she's always wanted an audience and she's always wanted to feel significant, and then she got duped by her own system, I guess. But now she is demanding that she gets to take Fred back to Gilead and have him properly buried there. And that's really what we get from Serena in that episode. And I think it was just, they dropped episodes 1 and 2 at the same time, and I think it was just setting up for what happens in episode 2, clearly. But I thought they did a good job of showing us her state in a way that I wasn't confused or upset.
No, I love that they called the people outside acolytes. I thought that was so intentional and really, really good. Because for people who aren't aware, acolyte is a very intentional word here, a young devotee. Like, it is somebody who is not deep in the system. It's not anybody who has any power. It is, you're either young in age or young in your faith or both, honestly. So that they didn't call them followers. They didn't call them disciples. Disciple is kind of the top tier in a faith system. They said acolyte. It's an Anglican word. It's a very Catholic word. But there's some real implications in that within the system you are a baby.
Well spotted. Was it Twello that called them that?
No, the subtitles did.
Oh, sneaky subtitles. I missed that. Good catch.
The subtitles did.
Good catch.
One of my favorite things, and we're going to get into this so much more in episode 2, is how much everyone in power in Gilead hides behind Christianese that means nothing and yet says so much. And the highlight for me was Serena, and this one was the absolute delicious irony of her demanding grace. Was just, mwah, oh, you delusional child. And then making the reference to Judas and the 30 pieces of silver. Like, I need you to understand here, chicken. Fred wasn't Jesus. He was a war criminal. Like, he was a war criminal. And...
yeah,
I literally wrote, I'm so sorry, Serena. And when she gets really mad about June, I wrote, I'm so sorry, Serena. I have no sympathy for you here. You created her. She is your Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, we have, I don't know if I want to say Serena's in a trauma response. I mean, we've clearly discussed the number of times how much of a trauma response June is in, and we'll get to her in a minute. But we see in episode 2 that Arginine is probably Arginine is certainly in a trauma response. But there's a lot of cognitive dissonance happening.
Yeah.
Between June and Serena, where Serena's just like, and I was like, Serena, you're a smart woman. Even when she goes to Gilead, we'll get into it in episode 2, but she goes to Gilead and she's like, why isn't he getting a big funeral? And the commanders are like, 'cause he's a traitor.
It's one of those, I keep thinking of the phrase like, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the amount, and very honestly, we see this level of cognitive dissonance and apparent hypocrisy in right-wing women of any movement, where they want the power that they feel is deserved to them, but they don't feel any other woman is worthy of the same amount of power. And they don't see those things as being contradictory. We saw this with Phyllis Schlafly. We see this right now. We see this now currently with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Ann Coulter. And that they want to create a masterclass of women that are allowed to be in charge and all other women aren't allowed to be. Mm-hmm. Should be clear. Everybody in as much power as these people have some cognitive dissonances. Yeah. It just so much. I think powerful Democrats in the United States have a real one around class and money, but right-wing women have one around being a woman. It is a pattern we see over and over and over again, and she does not have any, and I believe this is a willing thing on behalf of her brain. This is her trauma response, is that she has disassociated from her culpability in this system. It's why she's constantly shocked she can't get stuff done. Like her trauma brain just built a wall and it was like, hey, the bad things don't happen here. Not to you.
Yeah, not to you. You're different, Serena.
You're
different.
So it's...
And at times she uses religious language to justify that she's different, especially now that she's pregnant. And I think we're going to get so much more of that after episodes 1 and 2 of her believing, she is part of God's plan and this was God's choice to have her be pregnant. And making the argument that her being pregnant is proof that Gilead works.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll let you guys know right now, our Mayday moment for episode 2 is I have a lot of thoughts about the manipulation of God's holy scriptures that these people are doing in these 2 episodes. So if you would like to hear me dissect how nothing they quoted was in the Bible, join us for our Mayday moment in episode 2. But I'll do a little bit of both episodes, honestly, at that point. Because some of the stuff that she does here, some of the way that she twists her arguments and her logic. But I think what is really important is at the very end, she snaps at Tuello that the Waterford name carries power. Mm-hmm. And that power will be respected and remembered. And like you said, she always wanted to matter. And this was her way of mattering. But I thought that's an important reminder for us that I, in 0%, believe she loved Fred at the end. This is about, she wasn't mourning her husband. She was terrified June was going to kill her. And their whole relationship at the end was political. We saw that. They reminded us of that.
Yeah.
In the previously on the last 4 seasons, they brought up that kind of thing. Um,
And the flashbacks, too, I think they really specifically showed the only flashback they showed Serena having was flashing back to the fancy ball they went to in Washington, and they were dancing. And it was like, that moment was, they were kind of their old selves a bit in doing that dance, and dancing like a couple doesn't really dance in Gilead anymore. But it was also like, she can't separate any feelings she might have had for Fred in the before times from the political advantageousness of their relationship and how she used it, couldn't use it, etc.
Yeah.
So, like, I thought that was a really smart moment for them to have her flashback to show us that, like, I think, buried under there was some affection for the man.
Oh, and I think they fell in love at the beginning. Like, for sure.
Like, but, like, she can't separate it anymore. And so, because for a second I was like, why isn't she flashing back to, like, when they were a couple of young scrappy kids, like, living in an apartment in DC in the before times? No. It was like this super strategic political moment in her life.
One of the apexes of their power. Yeah. And that's what, at this point, her husband represented to her, was her doorway to power.
And that's, I think, what she's grieving more than the loss of Fred the person.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. And I think that's really true. But everything else I want to say about Serena connects a little bit more to episode 2. So let's put a pin in her. And
Serena.
Let's rewind to our June. Shall we? Fill us in on what happened with Junebug.
Let's hop in the Magic Subaru, as June did. And see what adventures our girl is up to.
I love, at one point in these 2 episodes, forgive me, people, but, like, you probably have watched them both too. She's like, Serena just can't go back and forth across the border. And I was like, you can!
All the time. Oh,
yeah. I howled in my hotel room.
So funny. Oh my God, so did I. I was like, why? You do it all the time. I was like, what? You hop in the Magic Subaru, June. It knows no borders. It knows no boundaries. That was hilarious. I was like, oh boy, these 2 ladies have absolute blinders on.
Man, do they need a lot of therapy, all of them.
So much therapy.
So much therapy.
So speaking of therapy and speaking of June, we get June but not therapy in this episode. She hops in the Magic Subaru, literally, and she drives to a diner where all the little murderous band of handmaids are having breakfast. And literally my notes, I was like, does she have her own army of handmaids now? She did for about 25 minutes, and then cognitive dissonance intervened. So they're all sitting around, scarfing down food, which is, a trauma response, adrenaline crash, etc., etc. And then one of the handmaids sitting with her says, like, hey, I got something to show you in my trunk. And she's got a trunk full of guns. And starts to go on and on about whether June can help bring other wives over the border, who they want to kill, how they want to kill them. Won't it be great? We're going to go on this murder spree. She's like, do you think Nick can help get more people? And they just keep talking at June, and she is panicking, which was hilarious. Because, like, girl, what did you think was going to happen? And so they're all like, but we helped you. And very tellingly, they said, like, he was not our monster. That was your monster. So, like, we didn't do that for us. We did that for you, and now we're asking you to help us. And June, like, freaks out, says no, runs away. But I wrote in all caps at this point, why is no one else capable of making plans?
Yeah.
They're just like, June, do this, June, do this, June, do this. And I get it. She made it happen. She's Magic June. Nick helped. Lawrence helped. Tuello helped. I get it. But, like, show some agency, ladies. Try and plan your own murder spree. It's not that easy. But also, during this moment, we get the big reveal, shocking none of us that know the show, that Emily is gone. She's gone back to Gilead. She's hunting down Aunt Lydia. I think it doesn't really matter what they tell us, because as we all know, fans of the show, Alexis Bledel, the actress who plays Emily, said she wasn't coming back for season 5. And so she clearly wasn't coming back for any of season 5, not even a like goodbye clip. So they just had to write her out. And it was awkward and clunky, but like it was always going to be awkward and clunky. So I don't fault the writers or the show for that. Like,
in fact, I thought the conversation that she ended up having with Emily's wife, yeah, was really good.
It was really good, wasn't it? It surprised me because it wasn't a conversation I was expecting. But props to Sylvia for recognizing that. So, you know, June immediately then goes to Emily's house and confronts Sylvia. And she says to her, she's panicking, I can find her, I can fix this. And Sylvia says to her, like, but it's not your fault. And I'm not going to blame you because, like, what do I get out of saying it's your fault? So she's like, she's gone. We had a little bit of time with her. We're going to remember it and, like, live in peace. Which is a very, like, somebody's been to therapy.
Yeah.
Also, somebody didn't live in Gilead. Like, that's, I think, they're making a real clear distinction between people who've experienced Gilead and people who haven't.
Yeah.
And, like, at one point, I think in this episode, Luke looks at June and he's like, I get it. And I was like, you get absolutely nothing, young man.
No, you get... The way Sylvia says it is, why does it matter whose fault it is so I can be mad at the right person?
Yeah.
And I thought that was so clear, too, because there are more ways to handle anger than June is choosing to handle her own. Mm-hmm. And I'm always glad when someone reminds her of that.
Mm-hmm. You can choose another path. And that's what Sylvia was saying. She's got her son to consider. She can't speak for Emily or Emily's trauma or pain. But she's choosing this path. So yeah, I thought, you know, as awkward as the reveal was, because there's no easy way to just say an entire character's disappeared, they closed it up really nicely. And we're never going to see her again. We're never probably going to hear about Emily again. And that's fine. If they drop her like a hot potato, that's fine. Because they've told us this. And then this is where June has her like Lady Macbeth freak out moment where she's like, I have to wash my hands. Yep. And she starts panicking about the blood. And she's like realized what she's done. And I think also, as you and I talked about this yesterday, this is also where she realizes that like it didn't fix it. And you pointed out, rightfully so, in the 18-minute long previously on, at the start of this episode, they specifically showed the scene where Lauren says, like, killing Fred isn't going to fix this, you know. And I think June clearly thought it was going to.
Yeah.
Because trauma brain.
For sure.
And now she's starting to realize, A, she didn't fix it. B, she might have made it worse.
And I think, too, especially when she starts kind of going at Sylvia, like, I can fix this. And Sylvia's like, it's not yours to fix. Yeah. You're not responsible for it. During the murder of handmaids, the phrase that I wrote down is, this is the problem with any individual revenge. It's never enough. There's always more people to kill, and there's always too many consequences. I think somewhat because Fred was the stand-in for Gilead, in June's very traumatized lizard brain, because she was not a full functioning mature human person when she made all these decisions, in June's traumatized primal lizard brain, Fred was Gilead. And if she tore Fred apart and she got rid of Fred, Gilead would crumble. We know that's not how institutions work. If she had taken a breath, she would have realized that that isn't going to do anything. But she was so, and we're going to talk in our Mayday moment about her PTSD and how they handled that in this episode. As I joked a couple times, somebody Googled PTSD. I'm so thrilled to death. But like, she couldn't, there have to be consequences because she's still in herself, in June, a mature, capable, rational adult, and she can't function. So they had no consequences for their actions. Okay, but she can't be them. So now she has to have consequences for her actions because that's what good societies do.
Yeah, that's what like law and order is. And like now that she lives in Canada. So she turns herself in to the Canadian police and tells them what she did. Luke is furious. And eventually what they discover is where Fred's body was found was in a de facto no man's land between Gilead and Canada, and therefore Canada has no jurisdiction to prosecute June, conveniently so. Whether or not his body was actually in no man's land, I don't know, but that's the story the Canadian government's going with, and I don't blame them. They don't want any piece of this. Fred was a traitor. They're just like, well, we're not going to prosecute a handmaid because that's really horrible PR. He was in no man's land. Whether he was or not, we're never going to know. She gets fined $88 for transporting a finger across state borders.
I was like,
I howled.
How?
She's like,
I don't have $88 on me.
You
can pay online.
Pay it online.
I love these little moments that remind us that they are still existing in our world.
It's like June hugging Luke outside. She's like, I have to pay a fine. I can do it online. He's like, okay.
I love the phrase, the crown has no quarrel with you.
I know. Yeah.
So some Canadian folks, let us know if that's a super like official Canadian crown phrase. Because that is definitely not
were just being
anything I've heard in Northern Ireland. So let me know.
Yeah. So, wrapping up June here, Luke takes her home. Him and Moira are grappling with what June has done. Moira is concerned about June's state of mind, understandably so.
Yep.
And in a slightly, this was a confusing moment to me, so I'll see if it made sense to you. She's scared of June. She says, I'm scared of you. She says, I don't feel comfortable with you taking care of Nicole right now. And June is like, okay. Tuello shows up, tells June how Serena reacted, and they have this whole thing about she will always be dangerous. I think you scared Gilead, blah, blah, blah. And then he just came to tell her, well done, which is, I think, again, indicative of the Canadian government's attitude.
Well, yeah, and I think it's also confirmation that, like, he's part of Mayday as an official American official. Like, he is...
Canadian official. Yeah,
Canadian official. I thought he was American. Yeah. Okay.
We used to call him American, but he's actually Canadian.
Okay.
We used to call him Hot American, and then I think we learned that he's actually... Canadian. But yes, either way, I think you're right. He is part of Mayday. And he said, you did something terrible that needed to be done. I know what that costs. Interesting. I would love to think that this show will pick up on what he just dropped down for us, but I doubt it. May he rot in hell. So that's enough to calm June down. She goes upstairs to the bath, and Moira hands over the baby to June, even though 10 minutes ago she said, I don't feel comfortable with you taking care of Nicole right now. So I don't know if you understood that, because that was a part where I was like, show, make it make sense.
I think, while I don't think that would authentically happen, and I think it's far too quick, I think what they're trying to let us know is that June did there was law and order here, and it was pardoned. Like, that's what Tuello let her know. Like, you did pay a cost. You are going to pay consequences. And some of the very fractured pieces of June could come back together. And so when she walked back
Moira
upstairs...
recognized that she wasn't not unstable in that moment, maybe?
I mean, I think about, so Moira and June know each other as well. I mean, not as well, but very similar to you and I. I know when you're not okay just by what your eyes look like.
Yeah.
And so I assumed that it was a BFF moment of okay, June came back upstairs. She's clear. She's June again. This thing with Tuello helped. It is her daughter. And I don't think that it was, it isn't that she said, leave me, and then picked her up out of the tub. She picked her up out of the tub. Hannah stopped crying. They all had a moment, the three of them.
Yeah.
And then she looked at Moira and said, I have her. Like, because I think the key thing is that she told Moira she was scared of herself, too. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I saw it. I think it's too fast, but June is a traumatized yo-yo. So.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy, is she ever. So that's where the episode leaves us. As we said, we get episodes 1 and 2 dropped at the same time. So you all will be getting episodes 1 and 2 dropped at the same time on our YouTube. So we're going to literally hit pause on this and jump into our episode 2 coverage. We'll be wearing the exact same clothes and everything. But before we do, reminder that our wonderful patrons out there, Brenda and Sasha and Jay, hi friends, thank you so much. We'll be getting a Mayday moment where we will be going more in depth into June's trauma and her PTSD. That video will be showing up on the Patreon once Eleanor does her Eleanor magic with it. So we hope you enjoy that. Also, patrons, please leave questions that you have for episode 3. Once it airs, we'll remind you again after our episode 2 video. Once you watch episode 3, pop a question in, and if we see it before we film, we'll make sure and answer that in the Mayday mailbag, which will also be a Patreon exclusive. So if you are watching this and you aren't a patron already, please join us. We want to have as many members of the Resistance as possible to have really fun conversations, maybe some drunk episodes or some live Q&As. Who knows what we'll have up our sleeve. We're here for suggestions. And we're here for you guys. It's literally why we started a YouTube, was to talk about this show. So as frustrating as we have found ourselves over the last 4 seasons, we do love this part of our job very much, and we hope you love it too. If you did like this video, please do all the YouTube-y things. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Join us on the Patreon if you can swing $5 a month. Comment below with what you thought about the various things we've discussed. We love to have conversations as long as they're polite and respectful in the comments below. So make sure you do that. And we're gonna film our Mayday moment and then film episode 2. And you will see it literally next in the playlist because they're dropping at the same time. We'll see you then, everybody.
Bye, everybody.